I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Welcome to the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. Today we're talking with Maddy Martin, the head of growth and education at Smith AI. Now, before joining Smith AI, she had a long career in marketing, and she's going to share a lot of what she learned with us today. We're going to talk about things like qualifying clients before you take them on, because you want to focus on the clients that you're going to serve the best. You don't want to just take any client who walks through the door. We're going to talk about taking the lawyer dust out of your speaking and writing, because it's important that clients actually understand what you're saying so they can make their best decisions. Turns out clients really hate it when they don't understand what you're telling them. Finally, we're going to talk about outsourcing services so you can focus on doing the work you do best. If you're not the best at a certain thing, you need to find a way to get that off your desk and into the hands of somebody who can do it better for you, so you can serve your clients better. With that out of the way, let's get to our conversation with Maddy. Hey, 5-Star listeners. Before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chat bots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5STAR. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Maddy, you're here.
John,
you're one of our first. I'm so excited to have you as one of our first guests on the 5-Star Counsel podcast. You, as we've already just gone over, are the head of growth and education for Smith AI, but we're going to be talking about client service issues. And part of the reason I wanted you on is before you became head of growth and education, you were in marketing for years. And so we're going to be focusing on, like the benefits that better client service reaps across the entire practice. So it's, not just making current clients happier, but it's also making it easier to market and sell to potential clients. So before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty on it, can you start by, we don't need the background on where you were and how you got here, but kind of what you drew from your background and how you bring that to Smith now?
Yeah, it actually starts all the way back when I was a caller for the annual fund for Hamilton College, and I would have to call all these donors and come up with really creative ways for them to give more money to the college that they went to. And it was a great exercise in sales because you have to get to the core of why they give. And it's the same sort of motivation for why customers spend money. If you start out the conversation internally before you start marketing with what do our customers want, what value do we bring, what problem do we solve, what role do we play in their lives and their work, then you are much better positioned for success. So yes, I have had a number of leadership marketing roles at different startups and companies, and I have grown marketing departments from nothing to large thriving departments. But the principles remain the same no matter what I do, which is what is the problem, what are the clients experiencing, and how do we make it a exceptional experience? And a lot of that is driven just by your communications, making sure that you don't communicate sort of internal speak externally. You set proper expectations, and you are always aligned, no matter what your campaign or your goals or your advertising or your website says, with the core need that you meet as a business. And then everything else stems successfully from that.
Right. I have done some of those, starting with the cold calls, or even maybe they're even warm calls when you're calling for the annual fund. I've done that for schools I have attended, and that might be only slightly better than true cold calling, because at least you've got a connection.
At least you have a connection, but you're almost always calling during dinner time. So maybe those two things negate each other. It's a challenge, but it's a character building challenge, and it makes you wake up. It's something that I would recommend every business owner does, is to cold call leads and not just rely on the sort of referral conversations that you probably have with really qualified potential clients for your business who are going to give you so much grace that not every potential client will. And then I think there's a huge shock in the cost, in the time that it takes to bring on that next stage of growth, because the next stage of growth is inevitably the less qualified, larger audience, less informed, not as many referrals. You start investing in SEO, you start doing event marketing, and you start advertising. You're going to get people who are not as familiar with your business. And how do you convey your value to them when someone who is a peer or friend hasn't already teed you up for that sale?
Right. One of my favorite sayings is smooth seas don't make strong sailors. And you have to beat your head against the wall, and you have to be bad at sales and marketing for a while to just build up your resistance, to know it's going to be okay. You're not going to get everybody. And the way things are going, you've got a network. You will naturally get a number of the warm referrals you're talking about from them. But eventually, if you're going to progress beyond, I'll call it subsistence lawyering for now, you've got to go out and get people who have never heard of you and people who have never heard of any of your normal referral partners, and get them in and get them through your system. Now, every practice is going to end up being different in terms of how, what percentage of truly cold leads are finding you on Google. But you still want to have a way of bringing those people in, because you never know what you're going to find out there, and you don't want to lose those.
It's also super important that you identify where you stand in the market and what your capacity is as a business owner. You don't want to drive too much growth too soon and open up the funnel and, in fact, dilute your service delivery because you have created too much noise and you can't fulfill your quality expectations. You can't deliver service and responsiveness at the level that you need. It's also really important to know the maturity of your business and your business model. So do you already have staff who are helping you, who can be relied on as you grow? Or, do people know, what service areas are you pretty set in your practice areas that you have? That's really important, so that you know exactly what criteria you will use to screen and intake new potential clients. Do you charge for consultations? Do you not? How do you identify who the best potential clients are, so that you devote the most time to them and to the channels that generate them, so that you use your time and refine your use of time as the days go on, so that you're not just saying, oh, Maddy told me to respond to every lead. Well, that's not necessarily the best use of your time. You want to screen, and you want to spend your time with the most qualified leads who are most likely to hire you based on their decision-making time frame, based on the fit and a number of other factors. It's really important that you don't just say, I'm opening up the fire hose and bring me those leads, because you're going to spend a ton of time on people who may have plenty of time to have a conversation with an attorney, but are not sincere in hiring and paying for that legal advice. And conveying value up front will help your conversion, but only spending the time to convey that value to people who you want to convert is the other side of the coin that's so often neglected.
Yeah, I mean, when you say where you stand in the market, that just means so many things. And, I'll admit, when I first went out on my own, I offered a broader range of services that I still thought were pretty narrow, but I've started tailoring and narrowing my focus, because I know what my best clients look like. I know what they're looking for and about what they can pay for things, and helping people figure out what that is, so that I'm delivering better to the same group of clients, solving the same set of problems, that helps them. And it keeps me out of problems because I know when I hear a few things, I know to start calling other people. I was talking to a potential new client yesterday who's looking for business planning, but they're both, married couple that are, one's a doctor, one's a nurse, and they're starting medical spa service. And they were already on the line of things I was comfortable with. And it turns out I'm not the best person for them. So I know they were right on the line. I could get them to one of my referral partners where he can handle all of their licensing issues that I don't know and I don't want to waste the time learning. It's just not a good ad for me. For the business planning side, my ad is I can do the taxes on top of it. For this referral partner, he can do the business planning and he can also do the licensing, and it's already there for him. So, yeah, I mean, it's not just who they are, but we don't want to be those door lawyers that take everything. But even beyond that, kind of always narrowing and knowing, recognizing those guardrails.
Yes, and not generating noise for things that are cases you're not going to take, and speaking in plain layman terms on your website, in your ads, and not generalities, not in sort of legal speak. Say that if you do certain family law matters, you literally mention, the keywords, divorce and separation and child custody and all of these things. Same thing with you, John. You're going to use keywords that are targeting a maybe high net worth audience. What are the ways that they're used to reading the Wall Street Journal and New York Times? Does the sort of writing on your website speak to their level of education? Does it make you feel like a peer? Are you in their sphere? The way that you communicate will convey that to them. If you communicate and you hired a SEO firm or a social media agency that sounds childish or not as well educated, then you betray your best efforts because you are outsourcing something that is the front face of your company, and it reduces the quality that your law firm delivers, but you're just not conveying properly. So it's really important that you look at all of your forward-facing communications and you say, is this going to attract the audience that I want? And can I also help anyone who finds me who's not the right fit, but I can send them off to someone who is a good fit, because that's important networking. It's a service delivery. We see actual 5-star reviews for lawyers who just simply put them in touch with the firm they did end up hiring, because that in and of itself is such a nice service. To not say, hey, let me kick this person back to their Google search, go find another firm. I'm not the right fit for you. It's actually an incredibly powerful experience to say, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to put you in touch with someone who I know or I feel strongly is the right fit for your situation. And they're going to be so grateful for that because you have just solved the first step of their problem.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I get referrals, people send things, other attorneys send tax problems to me all the time. And every time I'm like, you're doing the right thing. It's not that I want to hide my other tax friends from you. It's let me help sort those people. And that way I'll either have the conversation with them or my paralegal will have that initial conversation to figure out what they need. If it's something we do, we'll take it on. If it's something outside of what we do, we're going to get them to the right people who can help them and just save them the step of, as you said, we're not going to kick them back to Google to start searching again. Because, to go back to one of your points earlier, we know what problems we solve and we know what problems we don't solve.
Exactly.
And
sometimes that's the best service you can give.
Right. Yeah. And so we're not going to try and do everything. And by not trying to do everything, we can get better by doing the same things again and again, which gives us more insight into what we're doing. We see, more repetitions on the same general problem allows us to focus and develop better expertise there.
And that's a good habit to build in the sort of next stage of the conversation, which is, okay, you have this qualified lead, you're doing client work, and isn't that one of the only things that only you exclusively can do in addition to networking and the general firm administration and strategy? Going back to your boat analogy, John, there needs to be someone who is steering that boat. And if you've ever been in a boat, you know that you cannot in a large enough boat both steer and do other things. If you've ever watched Deadliest Catch, how big are those crews? There's a huge amount of catching fish work and managing the deck and the safety monitor and all these people who have their own roles. The person who's steering the ship has a critical role, but you can't do more than one thing at a time. So if you are the one who is steering the ship, you can't do client work and also answer the phone, which we know creates like a 23-minute interruption every time from the Clio Legal Trends report. And attorneys are on average interrupted 6 times a day, and that's just the refactoring time. So what does that mean? It means that you've got a 2-hour loss every day just from interruptions, not including the actual duration of the interruption itself. Kick that back to your hourly rate, whether you bill hourly or not. What could you be doing even if you don't need to bill more time and you're comfy? You could be networking and writing. You could be working on a book. You could be, doing pro bono work, whatever the case may be. Or you could be spending more time with your family. It's not for me to say what to spend your time on, but to help you identify where your biggest value is and what is hardest to replace. It is you practicing law. And the easiest thing to bring in as a resource is someone on the front lines, oftentimes also a bookkeeper or a paralegal or someone who can be a law clerk. But how do you protect your most valuable resource and asset? Time. Time is the most limited resource that you have. You can get a bank loan. You can't get a 25th hour in the day. So that is the most limited resource that you need to be aware of as you grow a firm. And the way that you use your time, the more value it brings to the firm, the more you're thinking about a sustainable approach to growth. You can't just add more clients and add more work in your day. You end up butting up against a threshold and you may already be there. And you realize I need to bring in a paralegal. I need to bring in a receptionist. I need to bring in a bookkeeper. I need to bring in a marketing agency. How do I grow this firm? Maybe I need to bring in a partner, an associate. How do I grow this firm and not lose all the hair in my head and lose my family relationships and be present in the way that I commit to myself as a professional, as a business owner? It's really important.
Exactly. I mean, right now, that boat analogy comes from a conversation, or multiple conversations I've had with somebody who is a previous guest on this podcast, Adam Anderson. For folks who have not heard that, as soon as you're done with this, go back, listen to that episode, because it really does, briefly summarize. Adam came up with this concept, or I heard it first from him, but there are different stages of business, and you get to the point where you're the captain of the ship, but you start by getting tossed in the water with nothing else. And you've got to, the levels you go to from not drowning to captaining the ship and sitting there at the rudder, you've got to learn different skills to get there. And ultimately, you're going to focus on setting direction, figuring out where you're going. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be as concerned with how do you tie down, insert nautical references that I'm
glad you said that because I don't know either.
Yeah, hauling in the mainsail and the sheets and all, I don't know. Weighing anchor, all the things that would go on a boat, or a ship. Angry sailors are going to be emailing me shortly. But it just...
That's not your target audience, John. I don't know.
But right. And so, the point is, I'm one of those people that wants to know how to do things, mm-hmm. but I've figured out the loss and the distraction that you're talking about. It's not just from getting distracted by answering phone calls. It's my best work is done running the firm, doing the tax planning and the estate planning. Our listeners, there's that focus. It's what people come to you to pay for. They don't pay for your professional services because you answered the phone or you've swept the floors or any of another of other things like the bookkeeping. They expect that to be done, but they don't really care and they don't want to see it. Yeah. I don't do the bookkeeping for me. I'm a tax attorney. I don't prepare my own tax returns.
Perfect analogy. I mean, imagine also the professional display you have for your business when you're not the one who's answering your own phone. And I mean, we see so many attorneys, John, who give their personal cell phone numbers, who are using Google Voice, but don't get any customer support with that system. Like a proper VoIP setup, a cloud phone setup setup is $25, $30 a month. I mean, you're talking about something that needs to be a core operational cost that you add in to protect your time and not have expectations set from the outset with your clients right now that you are going to personally respond to every call, that they can text you at midnight, that you're at their beck and call. And what does that lead to? It leads to resentment. It leads to missed expectations because there's no humanly possible way that you're going to respond to everything. And as you grow, it's going to get harder. Not to mention, like, you end up betraying the quality of your work by saying, I'm not big enough or rich enough to have, proper business framework. In fact, you most certainly are, because these services don't cost that much to give the impression and to actually to give the delivery of a professional business that has the support and tolerances that you need, that if you're in court or on a call, you're not getting a voicemail. And that person, when they receive your voicemail, is going to call the next firm on the list. Even if it's a referral, they get more than one. And we know that people are researching firms, and the Clio report says 2 out of 3 pick the first one to pick up. They don't know what they're missing if you don't pick up. And that's a tragedy, but it is a reality that they could be missing out on your firm. But because you don't answer, you never got the chance to convey to them the value that you add and why you're right for them. And that is something that is totally preventable if you build in systems of responsiveness that don't rely on you being on the other side every time.
Right. And I mean, it's not wrong or bad to have Google Voice numbers or cell phones. I mean, my direct line is a cell phone, but I've figured out how to redirect my cell phone. It took a while, but if somebody calls my direct line, it doesn't go to my AT&T voicemail. It rolls over to Smith. So it's something that it takes that one disconnected step of voicemail stored in a phone on my pocket and puts it into the top of the funnel, where once they get in to Smith, and full disclosure, I've been a Smith client for 2+ years, but there it gets in. We've got all the reports and tracking. People will get in and we will know that we've talked to them if they've called my direct line. And so, it goes back to also the cost point. Like, yes, that took time and effort. So there was that cost, but I still have the cell phone, not a hard line anywhere. It's not even a VoIP, but that gets plugged into the receptionist service. So it's part of, it gets tracked all the same, and we still don't lose people.
And you're in the loop, right? So the calculation is, what is the inexpensive cost of a system? What is your workflow? Do you want to have an opportunity to pick up? And if you don't in 1 or 2 rings, then it rolls over to a receptionist service. Do you get fewer calls because you have chat already on your website that answers questions? And then do you have a system where you're notified when those calls do come through and you're alerted with what happened on that call, and you can assess, do you need a follow-up or not? What we see is most valuable is not only to pick up, but to get the next step handled. Because, in the Clio report, again, they were saying that clients are expecting not just a fast response, but also basic answers. How long is this going to take? What's it going to cost me? Are you available? Am I, in touch with the right firm? And what do you need from me in order to engage here? What are my next steps and what's going to be demanded of me? Those are basic questions and not legal advice that someone who is equipped to handle the phones can actually do for you. And then in having that conversation with an initial screening, does it make sense to move forward after I've just shared that with you? Yes. Great, let's schedule a consultation. So what you don't have is a whole stack of notes, maybe digitally instead of physically, that are waiting for you at the end of the day when you finally have time for it, because it's always relegated to the end. And you call back, and guess what? 47% of people, just humans who operate and have a way to be reached by phone, don't pick up. Why? Because spam is at an all-time high. It's an unknown number. They're not likely to answer. So you do finally call back. You're like, I'm going to be responsive. And then you get their voicemail, and then you play voicemail tag. And guess what? It's lost at that point. So the point is that if you have someone who can not only answer, but also schedule and even take payments if that's required for a consultation for your firm after screening, then all you have to do is look at your calendar and take those calls that were scheduled for you for that day, and have a more predictable schedule. Be informed with, the information that person came in with to say, well, I know I'm going to be discussing this sort of matter because I have the initial call notes. So I know exactly how I need to win this client. And if instead you look at the notes and you say, you know what, I think that this is a better referral, well, you can do that. Or upfront, you can say in that screening process, go ahead and share the page on our website where we list our referrals, or make that referral. There are a number of ways to handle it to reduce your follow-up, because the chase is where so much is lost and the conversation is where so much value and service is built even before the attorney is ever in touch. We know that just that good experience of, I hear you, it sounds like this is the right fit, the next step is a consult, I've got 2 p.m. tomorrow available, would you like to book it? Great. You should see that invite in your calendar. Done. That should reduce the chance of no-show. That good experience, we're seeing a 14% increase in client spend because of that feeling, that confidence in the business, in wanting to devote resources to where you feel like they're a secure benefit and are well spent.
Well, and that's the thing. When people can call and get quick answers and just, the basic questions that if the person who's not specialized in any way, the one answering the phone shouldn't be the expert.
Right.
They're hiring. We can't be. We need to be focused on our current clients. We don't want to drop everything for the person who just called, because what does that say about how we'll treat you once you're here later?
You train the wrong behavior.
Right. But the other thing is, what you're communicating is, we have done this before. This isn't the first time we've done this. We know what it looks like.
Exactly.
We know what the pricing will be. I mean, we haven't talked to you, so we can't tell you exactly, but it ranges from super marketing tip. You start with the high end first, so you get that out of the way, and you give the low price second, because they'll key off of the high price.
Mm-hmm.
But you tell them about your process, because you need to have your process of how this works, even if you're going to file a lawsuit just like everybody else, just knowing the steps you're going to go through before you file that lawsuit, so that clients know you're not just kind of winging it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's so many things that we could be talking about and kind of how we get to it. And that's why it's not just this one conversation. There are going to be hosts of conversations, but there's so much that we can do to convey our expertise to clients, and it doesn't have to come straight out of our mouth.
Right.
You're going to end up conveying who you are and how you'll act through the people you hire, through, you said website earlier, I'm leaning more into a more casual tone on my website, only because most of the other estate planning and tax attorneys out there are just the opposite. And I will end up losing some clients who say, you know what, this doesn't look serious enough. And that's fine. Those people we would have done great work for them, but they may not have gotten the full value of somebody who has a little bit more personality, has fun. And, when you're dealing with death and dying with clients, you've got to have a certain sense of humor about it to make it through the day. It's hard stuff. I have to sometimes have those hard conversations where I tell clients more than I like to, I need you to stop and breathe. Just so we can get things done, because I'm not a therapist, but I do have to play one sometimes, at least to get somebody through a phone call.
And I think that being in a service-driven business, oftentimes service providers, whether you're an attorney or financial advisor or even an architect, right? There's so many people who are in service-driven businesses who end up having sort of a larger conversation or being exposed to more than they anticipate. Buying a home, why is that happening? A marriage or divorce or, family expansion or contraction. They're all like these life events that end up creeping their way into the conversation. So to be in tune with your clients is important, and to understand where your role is. And also going off of that, John, I think that gets to an important point, which is there are some things that are maybe not the realm of the relationship with the main attorney or owner. We often see this with late payments. So for example, just another aspect of what we're doing at Smith AI, we're also calling clients to say, hey, we see this past due invoice, there's an overdue payment. That's not a conversation that is one that you necessarily want to have. It threatens the close personal relationship maybe you have with your clients. It's quite transactional. And you may want to outsource that to us to say, those uncomfortable conversations, those transactional ones, you guys handle that, because I need that distance. And also, they're not going to pull on the heartstrings of who then clearly is a service that I have hired to have this phone call, make that call and get that payment, unlike the way that they would if you call them and say, hi, this is John, I'm looking for your payment. They're going to come up with ways to negotiate with you. And they don't negotiate with the services that you've enlisted to complete certain tasks. And we find that that's an efficiency. It also protects that relationship, whether your role is as the lawyer or the therapist. It's not as the, bill collector. That's not necessarily a role that you want to play or be seen as.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's a great place for us to kind of wrap up. We all have to know what our roles are in our business, and there will be multiple roles. When you start out on your own, I was where, all of the roles were mine. But you start figuring out, how do you delegate? How do you get rid of one role at a time so that you're focusing on the pieces that make most sense for you? The professional technical work, the ownership, whatever it is.
And I will say that, and I've said this many times before, I'm sure, John, you've heard me say it, the biggest risk is not outsourcing it, and it's not the quality that you demand. The biggest risk is in not outsourcing it and never doing the task or never getting back to the lead or not fulfilling the expectations. A service that you vet and hire to do this for you is and should be an expert, whether it's a marketing agency or receptionist service. And the most important thing is that you do it without getting paralyzed in the analysis of how to do it, because simply doing it like it's binary is going to give so much benefit, and then you refine that over time. And that is, if you take nothing else away from this conversation, acting rather than analyzing is the most important thing to do now to delegate those tasks that are not your best use of time.
That's a great place to land the plane. Maddy, where can people get in touch with you?
So you can visit smith.ai, which is our website. You can call or chat with us live there, and we offer a free 15-minute consultation so that we can steer you in the best first direction, as well as a 20-call, 20-chat free trial. If you use the code 5STAR, then you'll also get $100 off your first month, thanks to John.
Thanks, Maddy.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's been great having you. Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.